number 10, I want to try a little bit different approach, and I want you to get used to going back and forth. I'm going to multiply the square root of 15 through the parentheses. Now what that really means is I'm going to take the square root of 15 and I'm going to multiply it, and I want you to write it specifically the way that I write it. I'm going to multiply that by 2 plus the square root of 10. Alright?
So less.
So 2 times 15, or the square root of 15, is really just 2 times the square root of 15. Okay? And then, now here's the interesting thing. You can do this. When you multiply a square root times another square root, you can just multiply the numbers under the square root symbol times each other. Okay? So now what's 15 times 10? 150. So all this right here equals the 2 times the square root of 15 plus the square root of 150. Okay? I'll give you a second to write that down and let it soak in for a second. While you're writing it down, I just want to point out that when you take a square root and you multiply it by a square root, in other words, I'm saying that the square root of 15 times the square root of 10 is equal to the square root of 15 times 10, which is where I get this 150 from. Okay? Now, whenever we deal with square roots, we always have to think of, can we simplify the square root? So whenever we have to simplify a square root, we've got to think of the square root of 4 is equal to 2. The square root of 9 is equal to 3. Now, where am I getting these numbers from? I'm thinking backwards. What's 4 squared? I heard it in the back there. What's 4 squared back in the back?
4 squared, 2.
4 squared, not the square root of 4. What's 4 times 4?
16.
16. So what's the square root of 16?
16.
No, listen to me carefully. This is, when I say square root, that means my number gets smaller.
4.
4. So what's the next perfect square that I could take the square root of?
32.
No.
No.
5 times 5.
25.
25. Think of it like this. What is 6 times 6?
36.
See the relationships there?
It's a number divided.
Now, among all these numbers, does 4 go into 150? Let's see. So I'm going to turn on my calculator. And I'm going to say 150 divided by 4. It doesn't go into it evenly because I have a fraction. So 4 will not work. Let's try 9. If I say 150 divided by 9, I get, no, still a fraction, so this one won't work. 16 won't work, but 25 does. So if I say 150 divided by 25, it goes into it 6 times. Now what that's saying is that 6 times 25 is equal to 150. So I want to review something with you guys. I said that if I have a square root times a square root that's the same as those two numbers being multiplied, you could go backwards too. I could say that this is the square root of 2, or 2 times the square root of 15 plus, could I say the square root of 25 times the square root of 9? Or I mean 6?
Yeah.
Do you know where I'm getting those two numbers from? What's 25 times 6?
150.
It's 150. So because it's equal to 150, I can do this. But what is the square root of 25?
5.
5. So I simplified this by saying 2 times the square root of 15 plus, what's the square root of 25 again? 5 times the square root of 6. Now you might say, Mr. Adams, I don't understand why we have to change it. Well, one is the simplified version. So if I say the square root of 150 I get some decimal. Now if I say 5 times the square root of 6, which is what we said was the simplified version, I get the same decimal. Do you see what we did there? Now the reason we want it simplified, this is much easier to multiply than this stuff. So our final answer is this. Any questions?